Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Adam MacDonald View from Seagulls Central. I hope you're well. Thank you so much for tuning in again as we reflect on a busy couple of weeks for the Albion, a busy week particularly, and a really good game in the last week or so. What am I on about? In the last day or so. Villareal at home in the final pre-season friendly at the Amex this time, and we head into essentially the brand new season of the Premier League. Now it begins on Saturday. And pre-season is done, as Adam Webster said in an Instagram post over the weekend. Pre-season finito, that was the word he used. So yeah, ending off what's results-wise been a really positive pre-season campaign. Loads of talking points over these last couple of weeks to really get stuck into. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you watching this video, getting involved, listening to this podcast, and just kind of getting involved in the channel in all your usual ways. Please, if you do enjoy it, bang a comment, get involved in the chat. Please leave a like. So good to hear your thoughts and kind of just hear whether you disagree with me, agree with me, and just kind of get stuck into the big issues, because that's essentially why I do this and that's what it's for. So thank you so much for getting involved as always. And a lot to get into. So yeah, busy week really with many departures, two quite high-profile departures. Obviously, we had the Pascal Gross one about 10 days ago, and then, what had it been 10 days? Maybe a week ago or so, and then Dennis Undav leaving on, I think that was confirmed on Saturday morning, or maybe it was Friday morning. So he's gone as well. Now, an additional 30 million quid really to play with on the Undav front, which we'll come on to in a minute. So we are really not without talking points, and it's, as always, I think this summer's been quite interesting in the sense that we knew that Bloom was prepared to invest this summer and bolster the squad. And, it was interesting that the De Zerbi situation came about where, they couldn't come to an agreement on how the squad was going to be bolstered. It's ironic, really, and we all kind of knew this. But it's just funny how, Brighton have done so well in this window so far, and it looks like it's going to be topped off even better as we head into the final few weeks to the September deadline. And we're going to bring in a couple more really quality players, probably take us spending over 100 million quid, and bring in, not just decent promise that we've seen before, like genuine top European talent is going to be brought into this club. And everything just looks a bit clearer now, doesn't it? Not that anyone really doubted Brian's recruitment model, but it was definitely like the doubt of whether having to get rid of De Zerbi in order to fulfill that model was worth it. And I guess the proof of the pudding will still be in the eating. I guess we're really to see whether, his replacement in Herzler can cut it. But I think the steps we've made this transfer window have shown that we really have meant business. And we were gonna be serious whether De Zerbi was here or not, but it was going to be in our way. And I'm really just loving the signings we've made and the people we're linked with, and hopefully I'll be on in the next few days to talk about some more massive signings. Obviously, Mats Hummels is linked at the moment. At the time of recording, nothing's been done, and the same with Ferdi from Fenerbahce as well. About £30 million to £35 million signing that we're looking at getting a really versatile player, young lad, 24 years old. Looks unbelievable. Looks genuinely unbelievable. That looks like it's edging closer, so I'll probably jump on in the next few days of when and if those deals get confirmed. But a lot, really, really fascinating times. And I think at the end of this window, we're probably going to be looking at this squad and thinking, flippin' heck, it's pretty good and it's pretty bolstered, and we knew last season's the gaping holes that existed in this squad, and I think we still need to go some way, probably in resolving that midfield issue. That's something that doesn't look like, links wise, kind of something that we've been on top of. But who knows? We've still got three weeks or so till the window shuts, and a lot to get into, and a lot to bolster. So I think it's looking good. It's looking really promising. So we'll talk about the Villarreal game. We'll reflect on that mainly. A 4-0 win for the Albion on paper looks very, very, very strong, very assured, and it was. I think in the end, it proved to be a pretty straightforward win, but it wasn't without its challenges, just in the sense that we had a few issues at the back kind of throughout the game. That was something that Villarreal definitely made the most of, obviously, with that chance getting in behind Veltman, who was kind of playing more centrally in that moment, and it was only Minteh who was really left out with the Villarreal player, and the ball was just played in behind. It got in behind Van Hecke quite easily, and then suddenly we were kind of opened up, and they had a really good chance. If Danjuma was a bit better at kind of putting that away, we would have been 1-0 down, and I think the game might have been completely different. I mean, who knows? It may not have been, but I think that's something that I kind of want to see going into the new season is, you know, in terms of style, how are we looking under Hertzler? Are we a really pragmatic side? Because I was speaking a lot before about how we're much more pragmatic kind of than a De Zerbi system, but I think we saw the kind of frailties at times. They got in behind us quite on a number of occasions, quite a few times. A lot of them were kind of offsides, etc. But we saw that as well in the Tokyo Verdy game, where they were getting in behind so many times, and there were offside flags, of course. But I think, you know, are we a kind of side that we're going to be opened up quite a lot? I think, of course, that right-hand side is something that we need to address. Veltman, brilliant, love Veltman, but I think we need a bit more strength on that right-hand side. I think we saw in all of the pre-season games, that's been a point of target a little bit for kind of opposition wingers. And I think bringing in Ferdy from Fenerbahce, who is primarily a right-back, but obviously plays kind of a bit of everywhere. He plays, you know, centre mid or whatever. I think that'll be a welcome addition, because then it kind of opens up questions around players like Lamptey and how we kind of look on that right-hand side. I think the left-hand side, by contrast, is looking really strong. Obviously, Estupinian is out, but Barco kind of coming into his own quite a lot on that side. And, you know, of course, Dunk's only really just come back. You got to remember that as well, I suppose, when I'm talking about this, because, you know, a stall for us and will make a massive difference kind of in that organisational sense. But probably, I imagine, only reported back kind of, midweek last week, or maybe the start of last week, and is going in and only having kind of 45 minutes against Villareal. It must be pretty tough. So yeah. I think on the opening day against Everton next Saturday, we will probably see Van Hecke and Dunk, I would imagine. I think, you know, it might be a little bit tough for Dunk going into that game, kind of having not had too many pre-season games. You know, Adam Webster has been the player that's kind of partnered Van Hecke throughout the pre-season generally. Obviously, Eagles played a little bit as well. So, you know, it's gonna be interesting. I'd imagine that backline is going to look like Barco on the left, Van Hecke and Dunk, and then Veltman on the right, which, to be honest, you know, is a very, very strong back line. But I think style-wise, I want to kind of see how we play a bit more. It feels like so often we do just kind of disregard the midfield a little bit. And while I think the midfield's going to be really important, and I do want to kind of come on and talk about that, I think a lot of our players kind of just in defence, knocking it up to the forwards and getting out to the wingers. And I think I really like that in a sense, because it's very direct. And I think maybe one of my criticisms around De Zerbi's style was, yes, it was very electric at times, but it was also quite kind of pensive and just a bit kind of knocking it about for knocking it about's sake, I thought. And obviously we saw that with Potter as well. And I like the fact that we get it into our wingers quickly, but to what cost? Are we kind of putting more pressure on our defenders to kind of play the ball a bit more? I think it's definitely an interesting conundrum that we have. And I think around that midfield, I think that's something I do kind of want to touch on, because, you know, we looked really good against Villareal in the midfield. However, is that the midfield that we're kind of going to be kind of fully going into the new season? I think if we did have Pascal Gross, I would feel quite comfortable with that midfield. Obviously, bringing in someone like Diego Gomez as well, I think will be perfect. But it sounds like he's not coming in until January. So how are we then setting up? You know, it seems like Hertzler really likes to play James Milner at the moment. And in the middle of the pitch, let's be honest, he's been very good this pre-season. But it's difficult to kind of properly get the measure of that, because it's Villarreal, Queen's Park Rangers, then teams out in Japan. However, in the middle, he's been really good with Weaver, and I think we saw that against Villarreal, where him and Weaver put in a really, really solid midfield display for the majority of that game. And then they were able to be supplemented by players like Ayeri coming on, and then in future, you know, Hinshelwood and Yalkule, whoever. But to me, you know, that feels a little bit limited, particularly in the fact that someone like Baleba, who I think would probably be the best midfield partner to go alongside Weaver, he seems to be playing Baleba at kind of a left back sometimes. So I think that whole kind of dynamics a bit odd, and I think something that we should get into probably later in the podcast. I'm just going to talk a bit more about UEFA because I think he was really, really good. But if we get into the game and we get into the goals, let's start with the first goal. João Pedro with an absolutely unbelievable strike in the fairly early on, so halfway through the first half. I think it was 14 minutes, was it actually maybe? A brilliant strike of his left foot into the top corner down the south stand end of the pitch, and it was brilliant. So good to have João Pedro back. Obviously a player who's been so important for us over this last year since we signed him for a big fee at the time, 30 million quid, you got to remember. But someone who's just proven so much value for that 50 million quid. And, going forward into transfer windows, if he is a player that might ever be nabbed from bigger clubs, that 30 million will definitely be kind of built upon. So yeah, a massive player to get back, and someone we haven't had all pre-season. And I think whilst, I'm talking about our defence and our midfield, the attack is something that's looking so healthy at the moment. A lot of our focus has been around kind of, our wingers, our right wingers, Minteh, Kozia-Dubry, Mitoma, Dingra, etc. However, having João Pedro back as someone who's so dynamic, can play alongside Danny Welbeck, can drop into that kind of number 10 space, can be so fluid with how he plays. So good to have him back. And I think I heard Hertzler speaking about the fact that he was carrying an injury as pre-season started, and they wanted to spend the first few weeks just getting him up to speed. And I think that's the same with someone like Enciso as well, who's clearly got a bit of a problem, played a lot of games, and they're just going to take their time with him. And I think we'll probably see João Pedro start against Everton on Saturday. However, he's not going to be fully up to speed, and he's probably only going to play about 60 minutes or so. But I like the fact that he plays, João Pedro and Welbeck. He kind of plays a 2/ a kind of 1 and a 1. And I think those two playing off each other with the wingers around them, it's brilliant. Just having literally the 2 in midfield and then the 4 up front. You can just basically view it like that: 2 wingers and 2 strikers. Such a good. It just feels so brilliant to watch. But I think for me, I'm kind of at a point where I just want to get the measure of things a little bit more. Do you know what I mean? Understand a bit more about the system, because I do still feel a bit fully unsure about kind of what the system is. Is it kind of a repeat of De Zerbi? Well, it doesn't feel like it. Is it a really pragmatic way of playing? I'm not really too sure. We tend to bypass the midfield quite a bit, which I find quite interesting. We're very winger focused. Is that his style, Hertzler's, or is that just because we've brought in so many quality wingers, and that's kind of naturally how things are coming about, and we're depending on these quality players? So I think I want to get a measure of it. I think kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 games in, I'm going to feel a bit more kind of confident and comfortable about how things are, because we're looking so impressive in pre-season. You have the caveat, of course, it's kind of lesser opposition, so to speak, although Villareal are a decent European side. However, you kind of, I think maybe it is that 31 years old manager. I do have a level of apprehension still going into this season, and thinking, God, these tactics seem quite interesting, and I know they're essentially a continuation of De Zerbi, but they are still a bit different, aren't they? And I want to see it a bit more. And I think once we've got those players in and we've kind of trimmed the fat a little bit of the squad, things will feel a lot, well, at least from my perspective. Maybe you don't feel this at all. I'll feel a bit more confident and just assured about kind of who we are as a team, what our style identity is, and how we're looking. Because not that I don't, but kind of I'm getting a gauge for it, and I'm trying to still work it out, I think is what I'm saying. It's interesting though, after the game, Hertzler was talking about kind of him wanting to, quote unquote, as I've put it, trim the fat in the squad. And he said that he's got a lot of big decisions to make over the next few weeks. And of course that'll be about bringing players in, but it's going to be about the future of kind of other players. There was going to be a place for Pascal Gross in this side. Does that mean that another midfield spot opens up for a Moran, a Yayeri, a Yalkule, who we might keep on now? Where do we stand with players like Igor, who I think has been injured, but also we've seen him kind of away in Italy as well. So that's, or I think it was Italy he was away, or maybe he was back in Brazil, I don't even know. But it looked like he went on holiday like last week. So it's all a bit weird. And I think there are many decisions to make. Gilmore as well, that looks like it's going to be moving on quite quickly over the next few days into next week. So he seems like he knows what he wants to do, but he's still trying to work out through training kind of to what extent the kind of fringe players fit into a squad. Obviously, someone like, I think Igor's going to have to stay around, even if we do bring in a Mats Hummels, because having that extra player is going to be so important to us. But how, to what extent do those other kind of fringe midfield players fit in? I don't know. I thought Moran, for example, did look really good when he came on. Coming in at a right back, sort of / centre mid kind of role, looked really technically proficient, linking up with Jack Hinshaw on that right hand side. Some lovely touches in the midfield, but I can't imagine he's going to play loads of games and really kind of have an impact on this team, particularly if we do sign kind of Ferdy or Diego Gomez. So what do we do with him? Do we have to wait until we sign them to kind of move them on? There's a lot of decisions to be made, is the point I'm making, but I think it's a good decision to have, isn't it? And I think we'll find out probably over the next week or 2 weeks how things are properly looking. So if we get into the second goal was a great goal from Danny Welbeck, set up brilliantly by Yankuba Minteh, slips in a ball on that right-hand side with his left foot, and it goes into Danny Welbeck, who's kind of on the right-hand side of the box and runs onto the ball, and a sweet little finish, kind of pretty much straight through the goalkeeper. I think it was just above the goalkeeper, right into the middle of the goal. And a brilliant finish. I think a word on Danny Welbeck, I've spoken about him before in the last episode, but he does seem to be kind of just not getting better with age, but really just keeping those levels up with age in a way that makes him such a valuable player for this team. Someone who can link the play, someone who's got an eye for goal, someone who can finish really well, someone who can really play off those wingers, and those wingers can play off him. The amount of times we saw him bring the ball down, chest it, and I think, players like João Pedro as well, who are quite good at kind of trapping and controlling the ball and shielding it. I think that's going to be so important. And I really like the idea of those two playing together, just because I think it's going to be interesting to sort of see how our attacking looks from a kind of striker's perspective. Are we a one up front or are we a two up front? It looks like we're a two up front. But is that João Pedro role kind of meant to sit back? Then what do we do with Encisa? Would he go into the second striker role if he were to ever play? So many questions. And then, Yankuba Minteh got his goal as well in the second half, down in front of the north stand. Baleba plays the ball into Danny Welbeck. A brilliant ball from Baleba with his left foot on the left-hand side. Gets it into Welbeck, who kind of controls it a bit dodgily, but it lands in the path of Mitoma, who shows some lovely skill, some lovely feet to kind of get it around. And then he has a shot, hits the kind of keeper, bounces back. Yankuba Minteh hits it in on the rebound, and a really nice assured finish. And I'm so excited about Yankuba Minteh. You can just see that he is going to light up the Premier League this season. Now, whether he's going to be, the next one off the roster for Brighton, who knows? But you can see that he's gonna take to the Premier League like a duck to water. There's questions around here coming over from Feyenoord and only playing kind of, lesser leagues. Not that you can really call the Eredivisie a lesser league, but less physical leagues. Will he be able to adapt to the Prem, etc.? Only a young man. However, you can just see from the way he plays, he's going to take the Premier League on by storm. So young as well. And what I love about him is how clean every action he does is. Every finish is clean. Every kind of time he dribbles is clean. Every touch he takes to get away from the player is really clean. And I think that's something you don't often see in like quite young players. And the fact that we've got him, 30 million quid, it's a lot of money. But he's ready to go. He's really ready to go. Back to the point around our attackers. Obviously, you forget we got Ibrahim Osman as well. Came in for 16 million quid. I saw him at QPR, was away there last weekend, and I thought he looked a cut below a little bit. That sounds a bit harsh, but he just didn't look quite up to it. And obviously, we bought him in for a fair whack of money, but he's still only pretty young. But were we in a situation where kind of he ends up getting sent out on loan? Because I think we do have a lot of attackers now, and your Kozia Dewberrys, your Ibrahim Osmans, maybe you're looking at a loan for them kind of in the second half of the season, or even someone like Osman maybe for the whole season. I've heard a lot of talk about Adingra potentially getting a move. I would definitely keep him on. Ideally, my four wingers would be Minteh, Kozia Dewberry, Mitoma and Adingra, and then complemented by players like Sarmiento, who can play as a 10 or wide, and Encisa, who could probably play wide, and kind of that combination of players as well. And I think probably leave someone like Osman needing a loan, really. Obviously, we've seen Buonanotte going out on loan to Leicester at the end of last week. So I think that probably alludes to the points that Hertzler has been making. But then we go and get the fourth goal. Danny Welbeck scores a penalty, and he won it really well. and again, really well taken. And it capped off a very good display. In the end, a display that looked pretty comfortable, but one that we did, we saw some weaknesses. We saw some areas that Brighton needed to improve, but we also got to look a bit more at the kind of squad. And I think that midfield particularly, I think is going to be a really cool one to see how that develops. Someone like Yasin Ayeri, who's had a really, really strong pre-season. Are we going to see him starting, games going into these next few months? He looks like a player who I've said for a long time looks suited to the Premier League. However, will we have that trust in him to kind of play those games straight away? Feels like the ones we can really rely on are kind of Weaver and Belabor. Obviously, Milner as well clearly has a role in this midfield too. Seems like the coach is going to trust Yasin Ayeri as well, which I really, really rate and I think is brilliant. But that's one to watch as well. I do want to talk more about Mats Weaver though, because this was the first time many of us had seen him at the Amex. Obviously, we've seen him a little bit at QPR. We didn't see him at all in pre-season in Japan, although he was out there. Saw him in the second half against QPR, and I thought he looked decent. He obviously has that size and that presence getting about the pitch, but I think in this Villareal game we saw a lot more about who he is. He was brilliant against Villareal in intercepting passes, getting, when a ball's playing through the midfield, taking that step out, winning the ball, and then getting us playing again. And I don't know whether he's going to be kind of drop into the floor, massive tackles kind of player like we saw in Bissouma or Caicedo, but he can do that kind of pivot, number 6 role, kind of spraying left, right, wherever you want. That kind of Busquets role of plodding about the pitch, but he can also, it seems like he's really energetic, can press high up the field, win the ball back, which is something that it seems like under Herzl is a massive thing for him. He was talking about kind of João Pedro was impressing him with his kind of counter press, and it seems like Weaver's clearly someone who's going to impress him doing that as well. And you can see the kind of energy and dynamism in midfield that he has. His presence, he's a tall guy. What would he be, like 6'2", 3 or something like that? He's got such a presence. He's got that gangling style a little bit, but I think in the midfield, you can just tell he's going to be so important. I think the only thing I'd say is I think he looked it so far, but you hope that he would kind of take to the physicality of the Premier League and just the kind of pace and intensity. He was talking about in an interview about how he's kind of moving out of his hotel in a couple of weeks' time. He's just living in a hotel in Brighton. He's getting a car next week, so he's hoping to settle a bit easier. And he's been told a bit about Goodison Park, where the first game is going to be. He was saying it's really tight to the pitch and stuff. So he's obviously kind of just getting his feel of things. But on the pitch, he looks like a player who's going to fit into the system really well, and it seems like he's the perfect kind of Herzl player in the set, which is interesting because maybe Gilmour isn't that kind of player, because a lot of us are going, well, Gilmour played really well at the end of the season, why has he been moved on? But he's not a player who's going to press really hard at the pitch, he's going to win the ball back, he's going to be busy. He's more of a player and a sprayer kind of player. That's another thing. I'm trying to work out what is an ideal Herzl midfield. I think a lot of people are maybe kind of working it out. I'm still kind of not too sure kind of where we are with that. And then the kind of Belabor conundrum as well is that Belabor, when he comes on, when he's playing, seems to be, he was playing at left back against QPR, or a kind of version of left back where he kind of came into midfield a bit, and then he comes on against Villareal and is sort of playing in that similar kind of left-sided position. In an ideal world, I think many of us would say that him and Weaver in midfield would seem like the two strongest players you'd put in there, and he's looked so good in pre-season. I thought particularly at QPR, Belabor looked fantastic, but are we going to see him as a left back? I kind of hope not. Barker's looking good there, and obviously Stupinian's going to come back, but I do hope we see a midfield two of Belabor and Weaver, because that you can just feel stylistically they feel like two players that would really work well together. I just want to see a bit more of that. Belabor obviously having his first season last season, hoping this will be his breakthrough season. But yeah, at the end, I'm just trying to go through my notes, see if I've got anything else. I've spoken about pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Obviously, Sarmiento as well. Sorry, he came on, and Sarmiento I thought actually played really, really well. Lots of people saying you don't think he's a number 10. I thought it was interesting. I thought he played all right as a number 10. He obviously had that really nice shot, showed some really good feet on the edge of the box to kind of trick and flick the ball about, get the ball out of his feet and put a really clean shot into the bottom right-hand corner. Obviously, it was saved. But he's definitely going to be a player who's kept on. With no doubt about it, he's going to be a player who's kept on this season. He's going to have a role to play off the bench, kind of breaking into that starting 11. We've got so much fluidity and dynamism in our attack where we can change it so much. We've got so many different options, and I think that's something that we needed to bolster that a bit more, because I think towards the end of last season we were really relying on Simon Adingra, when Solly March got injured, and we were basically just relying on him. And you could remember those winger, we were playing like Jack Hinshelwood and Milner at winger, both as wingers for that Spurs game over Christmas, and it all just got a bit hairy. And now we're absolutely stacked in attack, and it puts us in a really, really good position going forward. So yeah, hopefully this week we're going to see some interesting news come out. I think you're probably going to see the Ferdy deal wrapped up. You're probably going to see the Mats Weaver deal wrapped up, the Mats Hummels deal wrapped up. And those would be two absolutely massive stories, massive signings. I'll definitely jump on and do another podcast if those ones get over the line. But I think bringing someone like Mats Hummels in, it will be a really, astute signing. Obviously someone who will kind of, a German working under Hertzler, a German kind of team coaching staff as well. Someone who brings bags of experience to replace what we've lost in Gross and Lallana. Obviously, that's a massive part of kind of the culture that the club tried to create. A winner, someone who can play in a back three as well, which I know that Hertzler likes to do sometimes. You can imagine him playing in the middle and Dunk and kind of Van Hecker either side of him. There's so many reasons why this deal feels like it makes sense, and I think it's one that we will see wrapped up over the next week or so. The rumours are that, he's considering basically Brighton or retiring. Either one is kind of where he's going to go. So I feel quite confident that he will come in. I think if he does come in, it opens questions up around players like Igor, I think, for example. Less so Adam Webster, because I think we've seen that Adam Webster probably is the kind of first reserve in terms of those two centre-backs. But where would that leave Igor? Obviously a left-footed centre-half as well. I think it's interesting. It's very interesting. So yeah, lots of questions over this next week. Hopefully things are going to become a lot clearer about this squad. And we go into Everton on the weekend. I'm going to do Everton preview episode midweek towards the end of the week, and we will get into that, update on any news that we have. But yeah, I feel like I feel pretty good going into this the final, towards the end of the pre-season, kind of going into this first game. I think the squad's looking good. We've really, really bolstered well. We look really dynamic in attack. Our defence looks all right. The midfield's getting there. I think it's going to be good. I actually back us to beat Everton. I think we're going to turn up and we're going to announce ourselves as a kind of new, revitalised side. And speaking to some people this week, thinking Brighton are going to get relegated. It's just ridiculous. We've bolstered so well, and I think it's really good to see. So yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching, listening, getting involved. Whether you've seen this originally as a clip on Twitter, whether you've got it in your podcast feed, it's come up on your YouTube, you've searched for it, however you found it, thank you so much. I really appreciate you getting involved. Please leave a comment, let me know, do you think I'm talking absolute nonsense? Do you agree with any of the points I've made? Please interact, it really, really helps so much. And really appreciating you watching and getting involved. So I'll speak to you before Everton. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And as always, up the Albion.